Okay. Hello and welcome, everybody.
Hey,
Perfect. I see plenty of people are filing in. Awesome. There we go. Welcome, everybody, to our webinar with Venture Beyond. My name is Matthew, and I'm the Sales and Partnerships lead here at RevealBot. I'm really pleased to introduce to you today my friend Shabazz, CEO at Venture Beyond, and Syed, their head of growth. Today, they'll be taking us through how they scaled one of their many agency accounts to 300K a day in ad spend using automation.
cool. Sounds good. I'm I'm,
Beautiful.
Shab- I'm Shabazz, CEO, and Sai, my business partner, he's literally sat right next to me, so he just wanted to be on his own screen. Um,
Welcome.
yeah, Sai's technically head of growth at the moment, but he's actually transitioning across to his new role of CTO. He's one of the partners of the business. Um, we're building our own internal tool to help us to run the operation, so he's kind of migrating between those two roles at the moment. But hopefully this will be useful. We'll go through kind of our exact process. Obviously, in an hour, we can't cover everything, so we'll go into as much as we can. But I'm more than happy to answer questions as we go along. If anyone wants to ask anything specific, just drop a message in the chat, and Matthew will kind of bring it to our attention. So there's the three of us. Um, I will say we've been using RevealBot as a software for probably near on 3 or 4 years now. I think it's an integral part of our process. I don't think we would have been able to scale some of the accounts that we've scaled to the level we have without kind of a high level of automation, which we're going to go through in a bit more depth. So yeah, so kind of before we had the call with Matthew, we called it a small cog in our process, but we'd kind of call it a bigger cog than than how he described it. I think it's pretty cool bit of software. So screenshot didn't happen, right? So here's one of our accounts that we scaled. This is kind of the start of this year, 4 million in spend, you'll see over a 30-day period. Another one, 2.9 million in a 30-day period. Another one, 500,000. Just to kind of give you an idea of like the kind of stuff that we're working on. The smallest accounts we work on are typically 50 to 100K in ad spend. And the larger ones that we work on are 3 or 4 million per month in ad spend. This is us. So we do growth, creative. I won't go into this in too much depth. If anyone wants to know about what we do, just ping me at the end. We do CRO and we do retention marketing. The key problem we're trying to discuss, or the key problem we're always trying to tackle every single day, is like performance on paid social advertising is subject to a lot of randomness. So how do we engineer the odds in our favor? That's always the kind of question I'm thinking in the back of my head, is like, how do we engineer this thing in our favor? So I kind of broke it down into 3 steps. The first is you need a content machine. So you really want to have like hypothesis-based sequential creative testing. So you really want to think about what are you testing and why are you testing it, come up with a clear hypothesis. Once you've got the results from that, you then go on to the next stage of testing where you use some of the results from the first stage to indicate what you do next. And in terms of one of the key questions I always get asked is like, how much creative should we produce? So to give an idea on some of the smaller accounts that we're working on, we're producing 25 to 50 new creatives per month. For some of the larger accounts, we're producing 500 to 1,000 new creatives per month. That's inclusive of new concepts and iterations, just for clarification. And then a key point around the content machine is kind of like a bit of a mantra we have in the team. And I remember we had a video editor start recently. His name was Kevin. And I always find with creative people, they always want to be creative. And I always try and squash out of them from day one. Hey, you're not a creative person. You're a salesperson. You're selling product. So like I remember telling Kevin when he first started a few weeks ago, I said, look, go read advertising. Everybody in our company reads advertising when they first start, and get video editing out your head. You're no longer a video editor, you're a salesperson. And that is a key kind of like mindset shift that we have like within our with our creative team. Second part is you really want to build, so you've got creative, but where's the creative going to? It's going to a landing page. So we do a significant amount of landing page testing. Again, using hypothesis, we're doing sequential CRO testing. And we test multiple different strategies, advertorials, listicles, quizzes. We optimize the product pages. We have VSLs, video sales letters. And for some of the smaller accounts, we might be doing just one test per month because there's not enough traffic coming in to justify more than that. Some of the larger accounts, we're doing 4 to 6 new landing pages per month, or we might be doing 4 to 6 CRO tests on existing landing pages. And I think that's been a fundamental part of being able to grow brands predictably, is like testing both of these things in tandem. You really want to do the creative and the landing page. If you're just thinking about, everybody talks significantly about the creative, but they're not talking enough about the landing pages. And I think that if we didn't have strong landing pages, we just would not be spending the kind of money that we're spending. And then the third part is really like who runs all of this. You've got to run the media, right? So put here, you've got to leverage a growth team with automation. There's three kind of elements. You have the growth team, which we typically hire STEM grads. So people who've done maths, physics, engineering, anything that's more like quantitative and more analytical. We find that those make the best media buyers. And then we tie that together with a data stack. So we bring in all our data into our own warehouse. We built our own front end dashboards to report on the data. And then media buying automation. So that's the robot rules that you guys provide us in the software. And we're going to go into some more depth on some of these later on in the presentation. So we won't have a chance to go through all these three things. I'm more than happy to do a follow-up webinar where we discuss them in more depth, but we'll touch on part one. And within part three, we're more specifically going to talk about the growth team and the media buying automation. So first step, the content machine. Account growth equals simply ad quality times ad quantity. It's like how many ads can you make and how good are they if you really break it down. So everyone always asks me like how many creatives should we make? And the answer is you should not make, I can't even pronounce that number, like 9 billion, 190 million. You should not make an infinite number of creatives because we just don't have that much resource, right? So the way I kind of like approach this problem is, well, here's some data of one of the accounts that's spending around about 2 million per month. You'll see kind of like the green line here is the trend of ad spend. And this is a line of best fit, that's why it's just a straight line. But you'll see kind of as the ad spend increased on this account throughout a year, you'll see that the number of ads kind of went almost similarly in a line to that. So we can't say exactly that, okay, more ads equals more revenue, but it actually, there is some correlation between those things. You do need more ads to have more chance of achieving more revenue. And for that exact same brand, here's the number of ads we launched per month. You'll notice it kind of started around 200, and then it peaked at around about 600 towards the end of the year. I'm actually super lazy because I got this from an old presentation from 2022. I can tell you the data from 2023 is we pretty much for the same brand, I think we almost doubled or 2.5 times the amount of creative we're producing. So a significant amount of credit is being made for that. And just for the same time period, I can tell you that we had 35,000 raw video and images. We actually counted it. I pulled a report from Frame.io using the API. We had 35,000 raw images and videos. From that, we were able to make around about 6,000 ads. And that was kind of split half between new concepts and variations. And that's kind of, tying into this data as well. This is all part of the same kind of case study. So the key thing is like, I've kind of always think about this production equilibrium point, bit of jargon, but like basically what does it mean is like, how much creative should we produce? What should the cost be and what should the quality be? And it's this kind of typical trade-off of like, you can't have high volume, low cost and high quality. You just have to have two of these things. You have to sacrifice something, right? So if you want low cost and high quality, you're going to sacrifice on volume. You're just not going to get that many ads made and every other combination of those things. And where do we end up? Like, this is really like where we always want to be, which is we're producing slightly lower quality ads, but they're faster to produce. So we get more volume and they don't cost so much. So because they don't cost as much, we have a limited amount of resource. So we're able to produce more creatives. So this is kind of, you could think about this as speed really, and cost. So we're kind of like slightly left and up of center on this kind of equilibrium point here. I'll say this is quite generalized. We depends on the strategy we run. So we do run some pretty polished ads, but we also run some quick and dirty ads that don't look so great, but they do produce good results. So you do, on average, you want to be here, but there are ads obviously that are kind of all the way around this spectrum. So like where to start? Because always kind of get ask the question by brand is like, okay, this is all nice, but like where do you actually start from in terms of producing creative? Like how do you calculate a number? And I said it's a futile argument to try and calculate an exact number of creative you're trying to produce. I think instead how I look at this, I turn it on its head. It's like, what resource do you currently have access to? So what creative team do you currently have? Like, do you have a video editor? Do you have a designer? Do you have creative strategists? Like, do you have copywriters? I'll look at what resource you have, and then I'll try and work backwards towards how much can that team produce right now? How many briefs can that team produce? How many briefs can that team execute? And what I'll then do is split that into 1 or 2 week delivery cycles that we call sprints. And then slowly, you want to try and improve the efficiency of that existing team before adding additional team members. And that's kind of how you like work out how much creative you should produce. Look at how much resource you have. Don't increase your overheads before you've increased efficiency. That's kind of like the generally how I answer that question, because I always get asked the same question. Um, yeah, I've made that point here. So before adding team members, kind of incrementally optimize the process and increase the speed of the team, and find low cost, fast ways to produce creative to improve volume. And these are some key ways that we kind of use. What is these are all super low cost, quick strategies. Um, do variations of existing assets. If you've got winning ads, like make sure you do variations. You know, one single ad alone won't get you to scale. You've got to be able to iterate on that winning concept several times, and it's much cheaper to do that than it is to produce a new concept with new content, etc. Use AI voiceovers to test scripts. A lot of people are doing this now, but it's obviously way quicker and easier to get an AI voice than it is to get a content creator. They're much more obedient, the AI. Um, Product seeding, so send product to your content creators or to your customers just to get free content. Use real UGC, so literally go to your existing customer base and say, hey, just give us content if you like the product. You can usually do it in exchange for like a small gift voucher or something. It doesn't have to be like the $200 or $300 that you might pay a content creator. This is a new one, so we've been translating some ads using HeyGen into Spanish. They've got an English-speaking content creator who have translated with a lip sync into Spanish, got her permission, and we're going to be putting a caveat at the bottom of the ad copy to say, hey, this has been translated with AI, and she was pretty happy with doing it that way. Midjourney, like we have our own server set up on Midjourney, so don't use the public servers. Create your own one, create a Discord, and just share it with everybody. I can tell you now we're running probably around about $1 million of ad spend per month with creatives made in Midjourney, which is insane given that it didn't exist like 12 months ago. And then a recent trend, AI UGC. So ArcAds is pretty cool. It was trending on Twitter recently. I think it went a bit viral. So the content on its own looks kind of fake, but when you lace it in with lots of B-roll, like you can't really tell. So I find that's quite efficient way of getting scripts kind of acted out. And then another kind of thing on cost is like geographical arbitrage. So we have a UK team, but we also have a remote team who's at kind of a slightly lower labor cost. We tend to find the editors in the UK are able to kind of lead the concepts, and we're trying to depend more and more on the remote editors to kind of create iterations around some of the existing concepts. So these are all kind of ways to drive down your overall cost. I'd say the number one thing that's driven down our cost significantly is Midjourney. Like the amount of content we're able to produce just using some AI is kind of insane. And then kind of final point on this is flexibility. So when you find a winning creative, you really want to be able to hammer down and create iterations of it. And when you're stuck to having, so previously we used to have like pods with just an editor in the pod. Now we have like a kind of a more flexible editing team, which I'll go through in a bit more depth in a minute. When you have this more flexible team, I'll put here, look, you've got some fixed team, some flexible team, and some external contractors. It gives you the ability to scale up quickly when you've got a winning creative. So if your fixed team, which is fixed to that client or fixed to that brand, is fully stacked up and can't do anything else, you go to a more flexible pool of editors who we have like a remote team who's a more flexible pool, and they can pick up jobs between clients. And then when we get stuck and we're like, okay, we just at maximum capacity, we use some external contractors who take on work on like a gig basis that we use on a regular basis. So that's kind of me just like really brushing over the content machine. Like I can't go into it in depth. That's like it would be so much to unpack this like in a presentation. So I thought just as a quick summary. Um, and then kind of leading on from there. So like kind of the other part of it. So going into part three now is we're going to talk about the growth team, and then Side's going to talk about some of the automations that the growth team also use. So yeah. So how do you build an elite growth team? So this is a problem I've been trying to solve for the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and I've been kind of continuously optimizing the process of hiring the right staff, training them, writing the right job descriptions, the right job scorecards. I'd say kind of at low scale, this is literally the most efficient way to do things. You just have a growth strategist who's your media buyer, you have a creative strategist, and you have a video editor. And this is how we used to do things at lower scale. And in some cases, you don't even need a creative strategist. You can just have a video editor who understands creative strategy. And you have a growth strategist who can communicate directly with the video editor. And it's the reason it's so efficient is because just nodes of communication is very small. Like I'm going to talk about that in a second, but the smaller the team, the more efficient always. But there's a limit to how much creative you can produce with a smaller team. So we ended up transitioning to this model, which, as you can see, there's lots of arrows, and all these arrows are like, I don't know, that gives me anxiety looking at these this many arrows. But we had a pod team with a GS and a CS. And you can imagine the number of people they were trying to communicate with, right? We had a studio team. We used to have we had an in-house studio where we were shooting content. We had a content creator team producing raw content, the post-production team who were editing the stuff produced by these guys. We had a CRO and landing page team, a data team, and then the client. So you can imagine in the middle, these guys are getting hammered by everybody in every direction, right? Having to shoot briefs out. And we used to have forms for all of the different requests going out to all of these different sub teams. And this on paper seems super efficient. When it came to reality, like just too much communication was happening and things were kind of like these guys ended up becoming full-time project managers, which wasn't very efficient. Um, and it created, this is a key point here, it created too much dependency on the pod team initiating all the work. When we had like some talented people in the client team, in the studio team, in the post-production team, and we were kind of, they were just sat there waiting for the pod to say, hey, what do we do? Um, so it led to like an underutilization of these sub teams and in terms of their time and also their skill. Um, and then yeah, just to kind of hammer, I'm always thinking about this. This graph is always quite interesting to me because when you have two people in a team, it's easy, nothing slips. Is it me or is it you? It gets done. When you have three people, it's relatively straightforward. But the more people you add, the more exponentially difficult it becomes to actually communicate. We have a team of roughly 40 people, and if you work it out with this equation, that's 780 lines of communication. So you can imagine if everyone's DMing everyone on Slack, that's an insane amount of communication. Like so much stuff goes missing and kind of goes haywire, and you just can't control it anymore. So I thought kind of long and hard about this problem. And actually, this is a diagram I copied off the internet somewhere that really got me thinking. And how I think about this is, so after seeing this diagram, I kind of thought, okay, well, all you really want to do is make sure that there's three lines of communication between wider teams. So you can imagine this is like our client team, this is our pod team, and this is our kind of more delivery team. So we shifted the structure a little bit, and the pod team kind of drives the rest of the team in terms of strategy. Um, yeah, key point here. Multi-skill small delivery teams are highly efficient, but single skill large delivery teams can achieve more volume. So at some point you've got to transition from here to here. So the brands that we're running that are like, let's say, spending 100K a month, it's fine to run with a small team. Once you kind of once you've got a client who's got, spending a few million a month, that team becomes bigger. So even internally on our side, that's a lot to manage in terms of communication. So we moved to this slightly different structure, where we had the pod team still taking care of strategy, but the roles kind of changed a little bit. And each pod that we have is slightly different still, depending on what the needs are of the brands that we're working on. But we have a growth strategist, and then you really want a skill stack of copywriting and full stack visual creative. Now, you might call this a creative strategist and you might call this a video editor. It's kind of like a bit fluid at the moment, but you really want these two skills possessed between those two people. And the reason I call it full stack visual creative, because more and more now we have our video editors shooting content as well, doing some UGC, doing some jumping in the studio, shooting some content, and they're directly communicating with the media buyers as well. So this is kind of like a self-contained production unit. So if they were left to their own device, they could actually make their own ads. Whereas before, when we were running in this structure, like they couldn't make their own stuff. They were dependent on all these things around here, which has made it like way more efficient. But of course, caps the volume. So what have we done? We've got separate delivery teams. We've got a content creator team, a post-production team, CRO, landing page team. And how these guys kind of work is they get insights from the pod. Sometimes we set them quotas. So we say, hey, we need this many content creators, and they get constraints. So they're like, okay, work within these remits. And these guys now produce their own content without having to wait for these guys. So the content creator team, for example, knows for a brand, okay, you need to go and work with 4 new content creators per month. And you need to get 2 briefs from each new content creator per month. So you need 8 new briefs, net new briefs per month. And what they do is they work off of evergreen briefs. So we have a selection of like standard briefs that they just produce content off the back of. And this works really well when you've got new content creators that you're trying to test out, because you give them all the same brief. You're effectively split testing the content creators. And then what happens is the best ones get content, the content comes across the pod, they utilize it. But then the second time we make a brief, it's a more custom brief, and then that often comes from the pod as opposed to from the delivery team. So it's a way of like these guys in the delivery team not being dependent on the pod team and vice versa. And also with the post-production team, we're encouraging them more and more now to do what we call open briefs. So instead of doing an exact list of kind of shots and exact list of copy to use, which we do some of that as well, we're now encouraging them to do more open briefs based off the back of like insights. So we're saying to editors, hey, this angle is working, or like we like this competitor's ads, go and come up with your own stuff. And this is really actually helping to kind of upskill the post-production team as well. So yeah, it's kind of a bit different to the original structure because we have an editor here, but we also have editors here, and they're both kind of working in tandem, just doing things slightly differently. And now we kind of completely scrapped the production team in-house. Instead, we have these full stack visual creatives who, let's just call them video editors, who just jump in the studio and shoot their own content when they need to shoot it. The props are there, everything is there. They just go and do it themselves. And it's great for when they've shot a video, they've edited a video, but they're like, oh, if I only had that additional clip, they can just run in and get the clips done themselves. And we'll tend to find that the job market locally for us is full of video editors who've also done their own production. Because generally speaking, freelance video editors who want to go into a career path have probably done tons of their own shoots, and that's where they got the videos in to edit. So they call themselves a video editor, but they're usually kind of good at shooting content as well. So yeah, that kind of covers like the content side of things, some about the growth team. And I'm going to hand over to Sai now to talk about some of the media buying automation, which I think is like the key part where RevealBot comes in. And like I'm sure he'll hammer this point home, but I've got to say it's been absolutely fundamental to scaling some of the larger accounts, especially with some of the automations we're using. So yeah, I'll pass over to Sai.
Cool. So let me just.
Yeah, hold on. Do you want to share on your screen? Yeah. No, right, 1 second. No.
I'm still processing everything I just saw. Incredible.
Actually, it's about sharing your screen and then just go through the slides. Yeah, it'll be easier. I've got to do my Zoom preferences and stuff. Cool. All right. So I'm just going to go over why we use automated rules. So as Shabazz mentioned, it's as accounts scale, there are an increased number of ad sets, an increased number of ads. In some cases we have more than 100, sometimes 200 active ad sets in an account, sometimes more than 1,000 ads active in an account. And as you're scaling, that's going to go up. So automation becomes more and more important as you scale. I would still use automation at a lower level ad spend. So even low kind of 6 figures, things like that, it's still helpful. But it becomes especially important as you scale up because it's almost impossible to manage everything manually. So number one, it's like never miss a scaling opportunity, right? Because we have automated rules that will just automatically scale the winning ad sets in the account. It works 24/7, so the rules are set to run all the time, every 15 minutes, every hour, every day, things like that, across time zones. It's consistent and emotional, so you get more predictable results. Again, we develop the automation so that it's based on pure like logic and not feelings. Sometimes when you do media buying and you think, oh, should I pull this out or not, or should I scale this? You don't really know. And so we just designed a system where it's quite clear. It's just black and white, what you should do in the account. And then obviously it saves time and ad management. So like for one of our accounts, we saw in RevealBot, we saved around 4 hours per day on ad management. And that's, this is a notification directly from RevealBot. So that's probably one of the most important things because then you can spend time actually working on more important things like optimizing your automations or working on creatives or working on strategy. As a media buyer and growth strategist, you don't want to spend your time constantly looking at ads and pausing them and adjusting them and things like that. So you should spend more of your time on designing the automation. Cool. So on the next slide, like you might be asking why use RevealBot for automation versus Facebook rules, and like there are loads of reasons, but these are kind of the main advantages of RevealBot. So you can see with Facebook, you can assign rules on the campaign ad set and ad level, but you can only assign rules to active ad sets, active ads and things like that. Whereas on RevealBot, you have a whole host of like filtering options. So you can filter by, you can apply rules to ads with certain names, inactive ads, active ads, ads that have a certain amount of spend, things like that. So it's just a whole way more like feature rich in terms of like filtering and selecting like which ads rules should be assigned to. Also, the actual automations you can do is much more advanced in RealBot. You can change names, you can add emojis, remove emojis, replace text and names, things like that, which you can't do in the Facebook native rules. You can duplicate ads and ad sets and campaigns very easily with RealBot. You can develop custom metrics as well. You can also develop custom timelines. So like in Facebook, you can only set a rule like if the ROAS in the last 30 days is below X, that's kind of like a fixed timeline. But in RevealBot, you can change it. So like I can say, okay, the ROAS between the last 7 and 14 days. So you can develop custom timelines. And finally, like complex conditional statements. So we have a lot of complex like and or statements in our rules, which you just can't do natively in Facebook. So these are just small number of advantages, but these alone are like a huge reason why we use RevealBot for our automations. So going into the actual rules, right? There are 7 I'd say 7 main rules that we use. We have around like 15 or 20 in total, but these are kind of like the main ones that kind of run the account day to day. So if you go on the next one, yeah, so the first one is a budget change, right? And this is simple. We just want to increase budget on top performing ad sets and campaigns. And we want to make sure that the campaign is not limited by budget. You know, you never want to be in a situation where you realize, oh, I should have spent more money. You know, the ad set's performing really well. I should have increased this before. So that's kind of what you want to avoid. You want to be able to maximize your budgets on your top performing campaigns and ad sets automatically, and you don't want to forget to do that. And then the opposite way around, you know, you want to pause or reduce the spend on underperforming campaigns and ad sets. And again, you don't want to you don't want to manually be able to check this all the time. You want to be able to, you want to know that it's handled with your automations. And then the other thing is like campaigns and ad sets are kind of performing well, but they're going in a downtrend. You know, maybe the CPM has increased or whatever, conversion rate has gone down. You want to be able to control and monitor those. And you want to make sure, again, that's happening all the time without you having to like manually intervene all the time. So that's the summary of the budget change. And this is just a very simple example of a live ad set that we had. And you can see it clearly with the automation as we change the budget, which is a dotted line, the spend, like the daily spend on the ad set falls in line with that and follows it closely, right? So we can kind of map this this kind of like trend, or you know, this illustration you see across all of our rules that we do. So it just kind of shows you an example of like how your automations will affect your actual spend and things like that on ads. And just an example of the actual rule. So this is quite a simple one, but it's like a simple budget increase rule. So we try to increase budgets around 30%, 30% every day. And it does depend on the account. Like if you have higher spending accounts and things like that, where the ad sets are out of learning phase, you can be more aggressive in your budget changes. You can increase them probably every day. Accounts are less stable or lower spend. I would probably increase budgets every 2 or 3 days, and probably not increase by 30%, maybe 20%. But the point is, like, this will compound over time. So, you know, with a simple rule like this, you can have you can have an ad set that starts off at like 2K a day, and it can get to kind of 20K a day very, very quickly if it's performing well. And in terms of like the conditions that we set, usually we have, so if you just go on the next slide. And next slide. Yeah, so the conditions that we set are the ad set has to be running for at least 24 hours before any kind of automation triggers, right? And so the reason we do this is we don't want to launch an ad set and then straight away an automation triggers, because we want to allow the ad set to run for a little while. So like these values all can be adjusted. We choose 24 hours. In some cases, we have other rules, which is a bit longer, like 48 or 72 hours. But the idea is you don't want to make a change on an ad set straight away. So we give it some time. We also have a rule, we have a condition where there should be like a minimum threshold spend on the ad set or campaign before we make a change. And that's just because, again, we want to like give the ad set some time. We want to get some data before we kind of make a change to it with automations. And then finally, the ad set is above the target ROAS. So we want to increase the budget on the ad set above target ROAS. And again, with custom metrics in RealBot, you can define your target ROAS. So that's what we have in this rule. You can see where it says website purchase ROAS last 7 days greater than 1 times FB ROAS upper threshold. So the FB ROAS upper threshold, that's our upper threshold target ROAS that we want to hit. And if the ad set is above that, then we're going to increase the budget. And at the same time, you have the budget decrease rule, which does the same thing, but in the opposite direction. It just decreases the budget if the ROAS is below our lower threshold target ROAS. And then one more thing which is useful to monitor the automations. We actually have an additional automation that runs so as soon as the budget has been changed, we add an emoji. So it's just like an up arrow or down arrow in front of the ad set. So then we can see, okay, with the budget on this ad set has been increased with this automation and things like that. So that just helps to kind of easily track what rules were triggered on every ad set and ad. So that just is kind of useful just to see everything at a glance. The next one is increase and decrease bid. So it works in a similar way to the budget increase and budget decrease rule. We evaluate the ad set, we let it run for a certain number of time. We look at the data. We evaluate the ROAS, if it's above target, below target, and then we decide. We set the automation so that the bid increases if the ad set is performing well and it's above our target ROAS, or the bid decreases if it's not performing well and it's below our target. Again, we have the same thing with emojis. So we add an emoji onto the ad set to notify us that there's been a change. Usually we don't increase the bids too much. We usually set our bids at our target CPA on an ad set. And then we'll try to increase the bids by about 5% every couple of days if it's performing well. And the reason you don't want to increase the bid too much is because we've noticed that it actually has a huge impact on your spend. Sometimes it really overspends when you increase the bid a lot. So you need to give it some time to stabilize. You don't want to change the bid too much. Whereas with the budget, you can change it quite a lot by 20 to 30%, and there's no issues. But with the bids, you want to be a bit more conservative than that, which is why we only increase by about 5%. So yeah, on the next one, you can see again, here's an example, just an illustration of what happens to your CPA or ROAS as you try to control things with bid changes. So you can see in the first illustration, the dotted line shows the cost cap or the bid that we've set, and then the blue line shows the CPA. So as we reduce the cost cap or the bid on our ad set, the CPA kind of slowly came down, and then it came down further as we reduced it again. And it's the same thing with ROAS. So, or it's the same thing with an increase, right? So if you increase your cost cap or your bid, you might get a slight decrease in ROAS, but you get much more scale, like almost exponentially more scale. So it's a great way to actually scale your ad sets by increasing your bids. Again, like the key consideration is not changing bids too frequently or by too much. So this is something that should be closely monitored. And you should really monitor the change in spend and change in ROAS and things like that once you've made a change to your bids. One more important rule that we call is surfing. So we know that ad performance varies day to day, just because it's based on an auction marketplace. There's different users online, things like that. Different things are happening, so ad performance can vary a lot. Even you might not have made any changes in the account, but you still see huge variations in your performance. So we try to make the most of improved performance on a certain day, and try to respond quickly to that by increasing budgets. So what we just call it surfing automation. It checks the account every 15 minutes. And if the performance for a certain ad set is significantly above our target ROAS or below our CPA target, we'll increase the budget and bids straight away on those specific ad sets. And what that does, it just allows us to kind of again capitalize on those days where the performance is really strong. So this is kind of how we've been able to really scale to kind of the six figure a day ad spends. A lot of it is to do with surfing rules, because we just drastically increase the budget on the day, and we increase the budget quite a lot on these days. We increase it by sometimes 50%, and we've noticed that at higher budgets, probably above I would say maybe 4 to 5K per ad set, we can get away with like a 50% budget increase. It doesn't really affect the learning phase. We've not seen it. We've not seen increases like that reset the learning phase. And so, there's no real like negative impact to doing this because we only do it on top performing ad sets. We increase the budget for the day. We, in some cases, we even doubled it with no impact on the learning phase. We'll write out the great performance for the day, on those ad sets, and then we'll just reset the budget at midnight. So it just resets back to the original level at midnight. And again, that's done by an automation. And we do the same thing with bids. So we surf the budgets and the bids to get kind of like a double effect on our ad sets. So the key principle is when you have ad sets that are performing, crushing it on a certain day, you want to spend more on those. You don't want to miss out on that good performance. So that's what we call surfing. And again, you can see an example here where you can see this is kind of a graph showing like the results of like one day. And you can see we add the automation triggered at this certain time around like 10. We saw a huge spike in spend, and then we had elevated spend throughout the rest of the day. So like you can see the projected revenue is the revenue that was projected, like if we didn't do the automation, if we didn't increase the budgets and the bids, and then the solid white line is the actual revenue that we achieved. So it's just, again, you can see an example of how like surfing can help you like capitalize on those stronger days. Yep. And then the other rule is stop loss. So this is kind of like it's kind of like the opposite of the surfing rule. So because ad performance varies quite a lot, day to day, sometimes you'll see ad sets and campaigns that are just absolutely terrible on a certain day and they're not working and you don't know why. In those instances, to prevent losses, we just pause the ad set after a certain amount, after a certain amount of spend. So usually we do it after it's spent 50% of its budget. So if we have a ad set with a daily budget of 5K and it's already spent 50% of that today, we'll just pause the ad set if it's below our target. So as you can see, the rule is for like spend today is greater than 0.5 times our daily budget. Spend today greater than 0, and then website purchase for us today is less than 0.85 times by our target Facebook ROAS. So the reason we put 0.85 there, it's because that's just accounting for like an attribution delay, because we know intraday Facebook doesn't report conversions real time, that there's a delay in attributions. We kind of modeled we figured out like 0.85 for this particular account is a good measure of what your ROAS should be on the day, accounting for like the attribution delay. Obviously these values, like in terms of things like how much you want to like the spend threshold before pausing your ad set, like the 0.5 here, that's all dynamic. You can kind of change that based on what you're comfortable with. You might want a lower spend threshold, but we recommend 0.5 because at that point it's kind of like it's half your budget and it's half the budget of the ad set. You can clearly see it's not performing well, so you kind of just want to kill the ad sets. And we have the same thing on the ad level. So it'll just sometimes we'll have ads that are paused, sometimes we'll have ad sets that pause, and sometimes both will get paused. And again, here's an illustration. So the key principles are that the account should be protected against sudden drops in performance. So you just pause the ad sets to kind of ride out the unusually low performance that you see. And then the ad sets are paused are actually just restarted again at midnight, ready to serve the next day. And that's, again, there's another automation that just restarts it. And again, like you can see an example of how we can control the P&L of an ad set by pausing them. So in the example, you can see that the projected loss would have been like around minus 160 if we didn't pause the ad set. Whereas by actually pausing it, we minimize the loss to like minus 50. And again, we try not to do this on like newly created ad sets just because they're usually unstable. So you kind of just want to let those run even if they're not performing that well, and then apply the stop loss rule to ad sets that have been running for like a certain number of days. Again, this is just an example of how we restart the ad set. So with RevealBot, we just add a name. We add a term to the ad set. So in this rule, once an ad set has been paused, we'll automatically add the word stop loss into the ad set name. So then we can see all the ad sets that have been paused on the day. And we have another rule that will start the ad sets. So it'll look at the ad set, anything that contains the word stop loss, and there was some spend on the ad set yesterday, or restart at midnight. So that's how you just restart the ad sets that have been paused with a stop loss. One more thing is CPM spike. So a lot of the times you'll see that there are sometimes issues with Meta, like delivery issues and things like that, and you might see a huge spike in your CPM. And you want to be able to catch these things early on and pause your campaigns. You don't want to let your campaigns run the whole day with like a really elevated CPM. And so one example was recently on April 23rd, actually. Well, actually, there was a recent one in March, but this example is from 2023, where the CPM increased by like 258% on that day. So for one account, they shot up to 65 compared to our average of 25. And luckily, we caught this early on in the day, and the rules just paused all of our campaigns because of the high CPM. And this was like a quite widespread bug that happened at the time. And so we minimized our losses by just pausing our campaign with the automation. So here you can see an example of the rule that we have. So the rule is triggered if the CPM values and the CPC values are greater than 2 times our average of the past 3 days. And again, these values, like 2 times the average past 3 days, these can be adjusted. You can be a bit more conservative if you want. You can be a bit more aggressive if you want, and change it to like, okay, if it's 4 times the average, I want to pause it, or something like that. But the idea is you set up a rule to monitor your CPMs, and if it's suddenly elevated for a prolonged period of time, you want to pause those ad sets or campaigns. And finally, we have a rule that we call Hibernate. So this is mainly for ads and ad sets that have been performing well in the account, but have kind of going on a downward trend for a while. So because an ad or ad set is going on a downward trend, you don't necessarily want to just completely pause it forever. What we do is we just hibernate the ad, which means that we pause it for a short period of time, and then we restart it and then monitor it. So here you can see the example of like an ad set where what we paused with the Hibernate rule. It was performing well. It went on a downward trend. We paused it for a few days. Then we started it again with another automation. It was working okay. And then we paused it again and then started it again. So this is just the way, it just helps us kind of squeeze the last few drops of performance from our previously winning ads and ad sets. And then you can see in the rule here, the ads that are paused, they're paused for around 6 days or 30 days, depending on how long they've been running. If the ad's been running for quite a while, we'll try to only pause it for 6 days. Whereas if it's like a very similar run, if an ad's been running for quite a while, we'll pause it for a longer period of time, 30 days. And if an ad's been kind of newly created and it's recently going on a downward trend, we'll pause it only for 6 days and then restart it. And again, we use kind of naming conventions here. So we add the word Hibernate to any ads that have been paused in this way so that we can monitor those ads that have been paused. And then we have another rule that will restart those hibernated ads. That one you can see in the bottom picture where it just starts the ad set. And just an example of like how Hibernate has improved our performance. So you can see these are ads that have been hibernated and have been restarted after they've been paused. And you can see that there's 295K in ad spend across these ads in the last 30 days for one of our accounts. And this is 295K of ad spend that we wouldn't have gotten if we didn't restart those ads. Again, so it's like, and also the ROAS above the target. So it just shows an example of like, sometimes it's better to pause ads and keep them paused for a while and then restart them again to kind of revive their performance rather than just pausing completely and forgetting about them. So over time, this adds up, over the span of a year, you'll probably have a lot of ads that you've paused and restarted, and it'll add up and add to quite a bit of revenue. Yeah, this is the same one. So again, like I've touched upon the emojis a little bit, but for all your rules, you can set up equivalent emojis. So we have emojis for everything we do. Again, you can do this directly in RevealBot. You can append emojis to the front of your ad name or your ad set name or campaign name or whatever. And then you can remove the emojis or replace the emojis with another emoji and things like that. So this just helps. It's a really good way to keep on top of your rules and see what rules have been triggered at a glance. Yeah, and then the other thing we do is kind of reports to monitor your automations. So we do the emojis, which is one way, and that helps kind of like at a glance see what's going on. But if you want a more in-depth view, we build our own dashboards for that. So this allows us to. So we have dashboards that export all of the activity log in an ad account. So any change that's made, any bid or budget or name or pause, restart, whatever, all of the data is exported, and then we create custom dashboards to visualize that. So for every account, we can see exactly what change has been made. And then also if you want access to that, we're giving like free access to the dashboard for a limited time. So you can just fill in that form if you get the deck, and we'll get you access to that. The other way is just to utilize the RevealBot live automation tracker and the RevealBot logs. So if you log into RevealBot, you'll see on the homepage, you have your recent activity report. It'll show you all of the rules that have been triggered in the last 24 hours. And then if you go into the logs in RevealBot, you can see a 30-day log of all the activity. So it shows all the rules that have been triggered in the last 30 days across every ad and ad set and campaign. So yeah, this is just an example of how you can help like monitor your rules that you've been set up and see kind of how it's affecting your performance.
I think that's pretty comprehensive analysis on the rules there. I thought there's a good question, Matthew. Should I ask to answer one of the questions here? Is what if ROAS isn't measured correctly in Ads Manager? Is the program able to rack it on store end? I don't know exactly what he means, but I'm guessing he's saying, can we trust Facebook Ads Manager to use our rules? So do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So there are a few ways around that. So like, if you're saying that Ads Manager's not reporting correctly, you need to understand, okay, how is it not reporting correctly? Is it over reporting, or is it under reporting, or is it just completely random? Usually we see Ads Manager kind of under report slightly compared to our store revenue. And so we factor that into our rules. So for example, let's say we have 1,000 sales today, Ads Manager only reports 900. We'll factor in the difference into our rules and adjust our kind of target ROAS and things like that in our rules to factor in that under reporting. Now, you can do this, you can do the same thing if it's over reporting. The other thing you can do is you can use custom metrics in RevealBot, so you don't have to evaluate ROAS on platform. You can evaluate any metric you want. So if you let's say you're using Northbeam or something like that, you can export that data into spreadsheets and have your ad sets, ad set IDs associated with those, and then RevealBot can actually look at your spreadsheet and look at the values in your spreadsheet. So for example, look at your Northbeam ROAS for a certain ad set and make the change in Ads Manager based on your Northbeam ROAS or whatever. So you can use custom metrics, which is really helpful, and we use that a lot for certain accounts.
Man, that is amazing. That is some of the most incredible in-depth stuff I think I've ever seen. Really thankful that you guys have shared this with us.
Yeah, no problem. Pleasure to be on. Yeah, just I guess a little plug. We work with brands with if your annual revenue is $1 million and you're trying to get to 10 million plus, come talk to us. We do typical kind of agency growth services, and more recently we've started to do more kind of affiliate deals, CPA deals. So we'll literally spend our own money on your ads because we believe in what we do, and you just pay us when you get a sale. So if you're interested, just ping us a message, and you can find us in the usual places: LinkedIn, Twitter. Yeah, come and have a chat. I'm always happy to answer any questions and talk about anything related to e-commerce. So yeah, back over to you, Matthew, I guess.
Yeah, I wanted to close off just with one question. This is a curiosity question from me. How often do you guys find that you have to update your rules?
Side.
I mean, at the start, we were updating them quite a lot as we were testing different rules and trying to figure out what are the best ones to use. So when you first, I guess it depends on where you're at. If you're starting to use rules, if you're just new to automations and rules, then you're going to have to update quite a lot to really optimize it. And after you've dialed it in for an account, then it's a lot less. There are a lot less updates. So it just depends on the account, the complexity, and things like that. Yeah, it really depends. But like I would say, like actually we've spent, I would say, across our team, easily like 100 hours just optimizing rules, right? And the thing is, it's a lot more leverage use of time. Like I'd rather spend 100 hours optimizing my automation than 100 hours pausing ads in Ads Manager. So that optimization has saved us probably thousands of hours in the long run, and also help increase our revenue. So I think it's 100% worth it. Especially it'll really help you scale, and help us save like minimize losses and things like that. So I would 100% recommend like any media buyer to sign up to RealBot and use like a lot of the rules that we've presented. Use the rules that are the template rules that RevealBot already have, and just optimize them constantly, because I think that's the only way to really help save you time as a media buyer and scale the accounts.
That's amazing. Awesome.
That was about the best testimonial you could have had on RevealBot at the end there. You can just take that as a snippet and run it as an ad.
Yeah, if you guys don't mind, I may end up doing that. I might do that. I don't know.
Just do it.
Do it. Yeah, no, that was rock solid. Thanks, Syed. I appreciate that.
Oh, no worries.
Awesome. Well, everybody, that's I think all that we have time for today. There will be a follow-up email for everybody who's joined or was not able to join the webinar today, giving you access to a recording. Shabazz, Syed, thank you so much for sharing this information with us. This was absolutely incredible. And I can't wait to do more of these with you guys in the future. I feel like every single slide could have been its own webinar. It was incredible.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure. Well, guys, there we go. Another one in the books. I'll speak to you all again very soon.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.